So, Come Play is this year's new Halloween creature feature. I went into it expecting a psychological horror thriller. It was also written and directed by Jacob Chase. This is his big feature debut for film. And what can I say about Come Play? It is extremely well acted. It has a very original and inventive story between it being a creature feature and it being a tech savvy feature. Uh, so the story is essentially about an autistic little boy who has two parents who are going through their own problems, and the main story revolves around the boy being autistic and having poor social interactivity with other people, more so with other kids. He doesn't really speak all that much or very well due to the autism, so he relies on using iPads and iPhones to be able to interact and speak with other people. And in doing so, he also watches SpongeBob SquarePants. It basically relaxes him. Whenever he feels stressed out, he just kind of moves his hands around together, and the friction just makes him feel better. And it's just a story about a, an autistic kid who doesn't do well with other people, and he finds a random story about misunderstood monsters on his iPhone, then later turned into an iPad. And as you progress through the story, it starts bringing this creature to life named Larry. Larry basically wants to find this autistic kid, Oliver, and break out of his world and bring Oliver back into his world forever. And the main story is about Larry wanting to be Oliver's friend because he understands what Oliver's going through, because Larry has also always been misunderstood. Uh, Personally, honestly, the story is excellent. I don't have many gripes with the story. I think that the narrative and the story itself is very well done, very well written. Uh, I do have to preface this at this point and say there will be minor spoilers in this particular review, because for my review of this film, there are some things I have to say that may take away from some of the surprises. So, forewarned right there. So, like I said, the story overall was excellent. The inventiveness and creativity and originality of it, I think it was very well done. I think for the most part, it was very well written. There are parts in it, especially with a big plot twist near the end, where the story doesn't fully add up. For example, it's prefaced since the beginning that Oliver isn't able to interact with other kids in a normal way. You find out as you go on that he's done things to these kids that in the movie ultimately start bullying him. And when you find all of this out, you think, well, yeah, they deserved it. But then you find out an extra layer before the bullying, and then you're like, oh, okay, doesn't excuse the bullying, but it's understood because they're kids. So, you know, being a special kid, you're like, okay, that's understandable. They don't fully understand what he lives with, but at the same time, they're kids, and bullying is wrong, but they're also kids. So it's kind of like a double-edged knife. Like, you understand, but you can't relate, because being a full-on adult, you're like, it doesn't matter what they did, they have a mental illness. So there's that. Another thing too, the big plot twist near the end didn't really add up to the mom and son story prior to it. To me, it just, the gears just didn't fully shift in place as they intended them to, for me at least. Uh, Otherwise, really well acted. Outside of that inconsistency. Another thing too, they over rely on jump scares. Literally, the horror aspect of this film, outside of what the creature looks like and the artistic filmmaking shots of it, this film it over relies on jump scares for its horror aspect. This is a psychological thriller, but in the times when it's a horror, it's just cheapened jump scares. Give it 3 jump scares in, you won't even you'll feel indifferent about everything else horror related in this film like 10 minutes into this film, just because it's such an overabundance of jump scares. It's awful. Jump scares, I cannot explain enough. Jump scares are horrible horror plot devices, and they overuse it so much in this film. But otherwise, outside of that and the kind of oddity in the plot twist, I would say this is an excellent story. It's a good film overall. But with the inconsistent plot twist as well as the awful over-relied jump scares, I'm going to have to officially give Come Play a 6 out of 10. It's not bad though. Okay? That means that it's above average, but it's not a bad film. It starts off very artistically made, and there are parts in this that scream original. There are a lot of parts in this that scream original. But there are also at least half of those parts that scream jump scares and cheap. Now, none of it is cliche. I can at least say that. None of this film is cliche. It has a very powerful intro and it has a very powerful outro. But it's in the middle where most of the time it's very well written, but it's also put in place with cheapened jump scares. The story is great. The plot device is pretty horrible, and the narrative is well directed yet predictable. But it's not cliche. It's predictable but not cliche, if that makes sense. It's only predictable because of the jump scares, so I'll give it that. I'll put that in the jump scare category as well. So I mean, I would say see this film once, at the very least, in theaters, rent, even buy, do what you want with it. But ultimately, I would say this is a 6 out of 10. It's an artistic film at times that definitely could have done and had a lot more artistic implementation in this film. So anyway, Come Play, 6 out of 10. Thank you.